it's Sarah here from BJC Health, coming to you from Sydney, Australia. Thanks for showing an interest in one of our educational events. You're about to watch part one, so enjoy the event. If you've got any questions about the content, then please consider joining BJC Connect, where you can access all of our facilitators live. Otherwise, please consider leaving a comment and we'll do our best to get back to you.
Happy New Year, everybody. It's so lovely to see so many faces, smiling faces. You all look quite relaxed and happy. So I hope you all had a beautiful festive season, Christmas, New Year. And thank you for having me tonight and coming along. There's so many of you for the first time in January. I'm a little bit shocked, but also pleasantly surprised. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about gluten, and I do encourage you to get your questions coming in, because I'm going to not try and talk too much. I'm going to try and answer as many questions as possible, because as a dietitian, this is probably one of the things I get asked, probably one of the most. Should I go gluten-free? Should I try being gluten-free? Does it impact X conditions? But in this case, from BJC's case, does it impact arthritis? Will my symptoms get better if I go gluten-free? So please ask as many questions as you would like about this topic, and really trying to help each other answering whether this is something that's suitable for you. So reading a lot of the gluten research, I was just saying to Sarah before we came online, you can actually pick up research to suit, at this point, to suit whatever you would like to say. So if you want gluten and whole grains, for example, to be anti-inflammatory, and as you know, we talk a lot about anti-inflammatory diets, there is some really good research to suggest that whole grains, particularly, which of course contain gluten, are anti-inflammatory. They can help with decreasing the risk of bowel cancer. They're really good for helping relieve constipation. Whole grains can help decrease the risk of type 2 diabetes. Definitely well-researched, reduce the incidence of cholesterol. And if you have cholesterol, it can actually help you actively reduce cholesterol. If you have high blood pressure, whole grains are really important. So even if you decide to go gluten-free, and this is something we'll talk about a little bit later, having whole grains or gluten-free whole grains and other foods full of fiber is still going to be really important, because if you do better gluten-free, especially with arthritis symptoms or gut symptoms, particularly, I work a lot in gut health, and we'll talk a little bit about that. If you do better gluten-free, we don't want to be eating low fiber, processed, high glycemic index gluten-free products, because it will still increase your risk of cholesterol, type 2 diabetes, higher sugar intake, weight gain, etc. So if we want to stick to that anti-inflammatory pattern of eating, and even if we're going to do it gluten-free, we still need to look at how to do that in the anti-inflammatory way, in a way that's going to help you reduce other chronic health conditions, not just help you with your arthritis, joint pain, stiffness, etc. Of course, if anybody out there, so whole grains with gluten can be anti-inflammatory, but you can also then go and find the opposite. I've picked up a number of studies over the last couple of weeks just to see what else was new before we did this chat, that talk about gluten creating an immune inflammatory response in people, and that yes, it may be connected to increased joint pain. It might be, or definitely can be, linked to gut issues. Gluten, in terms of autoimmune conditions like Hashimoto's, even psoriatic arthritis, psoriasis, can maybe make the symptoms of those conditions more severe. So you can read research and see both. And that's why sometimes coming to talks like this, or having access to podcasts, or or seeing a dietitian will help you decide whether individually for you it's important to try something like gluten-free. So the number one condition, celiac disease, which is an actual allergy to gluten, is pretty much, when you read the research, the only condition where it is 100% needed to be gluten-free to reverse the impact of celiac disease. So gluten is contained in wheat, products made from wheat, barley, rye, and in Australia and most places, we also include oats, because even though technically oats, and you can buy gluten-free oats, but technically oats are very low, if not gluten-free, they're often processed in places that are not gluten-free. So as a celiac in Australia, you're not allowed to eat oats because they're probably contaminated with gluten from the factories and the warehouses where they come in. So barley, rye, oats and wheat are the things that you have to avoid if you have celiac disease. That also includes spelt, triticale. There's a few other grains that it's important to avoid. With everything else, it is possible to be a non-celiac gluten sensitive person. That is a mouthful. If you are worried that you have celiac disease, you would go and see your GP. Let's say you get having lots of gut issues, lots of bloating, pain, maybe you have a history of iron deficiency, maybe you've been told you're osteopenic, because if you've had undiagnosed celiac for a while, it's likely that you're not absorbing all of your nutrients effectively, and that can increase your risk of osteopenia. So let's say you have a little bit of a history, but you've never officially been tested for celiac disease. So you can go and see your GP. They can do some celiac serology, and they can even do like a genetic blood test for celiac called HLA-DQ2 and HLA-DQ8. And from these blood tests, you can start to get an idea of whether or not you have high readings that maybe that puts you in that spot of being a celiac. Only 1% of the population are actually celiac, but more than 1% of the population will have some positive genetics to celiac disease, but it doesn't mean you actually have it. But let's say your blood work tells you that your levels are high. Normally you then get referred to a gastroenterologist, and they do an endoscopy where they send a little camera down this way, and it takes some biopsies of what we call your villi in your small intestines. And by taking a biopsy, the gastroenterologist can see whether or not you have damage to your villi. And basically all that is their finger-like, I guess like almost little caterpillars or like fingers that line your intestinal wall. And as your digested food runs through your intestines, the villi are responsible for helping grab the nutrients out of your intestinal tract and absorb it through your blood into your bloodstream so that you can use it for all of the wonderful things that your body needs to do. If you have celiac disease and you are eating gluten, what happens is the allergy, the irritant that the gluten has on your intestinal walls chops the villi off. So instead of looking like this, where they can grab all the nutrients into your bloodstream, they get chopped and they're trying to get your nutrients like this. And obviously that doesn't work very well. So you tend to have some kind of history with iron deficiency, maybe some other deficiencies. And for a lot of people, if it's left unchecked for a long time, then they might end up with some degeneration in their bone, like osteopenia. Once people with celiac disease stop eating gluten, the villi grow back and all of the issues are gone. So if you're a celiac, you have to you have to avoid gluten. There's no ifs or buts about that. But for everybody else, you might get tested on whether you have a wheat allergy, whether you have a gluten sensitivity. There are some blood tests that you can do, obviously for a wheat allergy. That's pretty simple. You can get an answer. But if you are gluten sensitive, the only way to work that out is to do an elimination. Now, a lot of people talk to me about things like leaky gut syndrome. So there's a thought process out there, and I think it's important to address this because it's been around now for quite a long time. There is a belief that because gluten is only partially digested in our GI tract, that the fragments of gluten can cause damage to the gut lining and make it more permeable. So it puts little holes in it. Basically, think of your gut and get a pin, safety pin, and push it into your gut in different places and create little holes. And it's become quite a big term in nutrition and medicine, leaky gut syndrome. Now, not a lot of doctors and specialists still believe that leaky gut syndrome exists, but there's definitely enough evidence to suggest that our guts can become weaker, more permeable. And the thought process is with these little holes everywhere, that toxins come out and they can enter into your bloodstream and create inflammation. And that inflammation might be contributing to people's joint pain, for example. And so for some people, potentially taking the gluten out of their diet might help their environment in their gut so that then their lining of their gut is stronger and that they don't have these toxins release and then cause the inflammation. Now, you can do a lot of reading on this as well. And sometimes the more you do the reading, the more confusing it is. Is it true? Is it not true? I've seen diagrams, all those types of things. I've answered so many questions about this in the past. And in the end, it comes down to one thing. We just have to try it. If a client says to me, should I try gluten-free to see if it helps me with my bones and joints, and they're committed to trying it, I always say, why not? There are some thought processes, again, in research to suggest that people who have Hashimoto's, anxiety, depression, irritable bowel, inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, there's many conditions now where it is worthwhile trialing a gluten-free diet for 4 to 6 weeks to see if their symptoms improve. That includes rheumatoid arthritis and any type of inflammatory arthritis in that list of conditions. Even I read the other day, and this was something that even I wasn't quite aware of because I've always done other things for this, but even one of the case studies I was reading was talking about people who get lots of headaches and migraines. Now, normally we associate that with a different type of potential food intolerance or food chemical intolerance of salicylates, amines, and glutamates, particularly one called amines that can be connected to migraines. And I would normally try that first. But this particular case study said maybe even gluten could help people who have chronic headaches as something that they're dealing with regularly. So how do we do that? How do we do gluten-free? I'd even be interested with the reactions down at the bottom of the page. Who has tried a gluten-free diet for whatever it is that you're trying to manage in your health profile? You go down to reactions, it will open up and you can put a little hand signal that puts your hand up. Who's given gluten-free eating a go to see if it's helpful? Okay, there's a few. and there's quite a few who haven't answered, so maybe you haven't considered it before, but I think this is where this today is a good start to considering whether this might be something that you would like to do. Sarah, do we have any particular questions at this point before we get to the practical things that might then follow into more questions that I might be able to answer straight away?
Yeah, I think we should pause just for a couple. And again, just a good chance, if anyone's been thinking of one, you can jot it in now. Just because you talked about tests. And yeah, I'm really interested in this because I didn't know there were specific tests you could go to. But if someone hadn't had those, how reliable are those? Is that something you encourage people to get before? Or do you need the test results? Like maybe, and we talk a lot, you know, different scans and investigations related to other things. But yeah, for this particular topic, how do you talk to clients about the importance of having some of those tests you mentioned?
Okay, so you don't have to be tested, say, for celiac disease or wheat allergy before you try a gluten-free diet. And it will also depend on what somebody is coming to me for. But let's say I always take a really comprehensive history and there's some red flags coming up where I've noticed that maybe you've been a bit iron deficient. I can tell that you've got some gut issues like cramps or bloating or loose stools, for example. Let's say you tell me somebody in your family has celiac disease or a great-grandmother, and your doctor's never brought that up with you. Sometimes, unless you're really going to say, I've got these issues, I've got these issues, I've got these issues, your doctor might not think to test. Up until recently, it's a 7 to 10 year average diagnosis time of celiac disease.
Yeah, wow.
And it used to be, when I first became a dietitian, it used to be that unless you were also losing quite a bit of weight, maybe the doctors wouldn't think of it. And then with experience, with a few particular case studies that I can think of, one, a 2-year-old child, through to one of my best friends who was diagnosed as a celiac at the age of 34, I think she was. Her doctors had tested her for almost everything you could possibly imagine. And I said to her, have they tested you for celiac disease? And she said, no, I don't have celiac disease. You're the one with all the irritable bowel gut issues and you don't have celiac disease, so I don't have celiac disease. I said, I think you should go and chat to your GP and just get it done. What do you have to lose? Because she had a lot of things going on. And she called me a few days later and said, how did you know that? And I said, well, it's just something that they should be testing for now, the blood work. And hers were through the roof. So there was just no way she wasn't going to be one. So they do something called celiac serology, the IgG and the IgA. They are not so accurate, which is why I recommend that if you're going to have a blood test, you add the genotyping, or you ask your GP to add the genotyping, which is the HLA-DQ2 and the HLA-DQ8. Now, if one or both of those become positive, it means you have the genes to possibly be a celiac. And then if you've got any of these other symptoms, physical symptoms that you've been managing, or something like iron deficiency, it then warrants you to talk to a gastroenterologist. And even though, yes, it's invasive to have the endoscopy, it's worth knowing whether you are a celiac. Because once you've done that, once you've eliminated whether you are or you're not, if you are not a celiac, it means that you can trial gluten-free eating to see if it helps you, do a challenge, but then it doesn't mean you have to be 100% gluten-free. There is not a lot of evidence to suggest that you have to be, or if you're not gluten-free, it's going to make your inflammatory condition worse. Right? I've read countless articles from doctors and specialists that say it's not a guarantee that if you're gluten-free, your chronic issues are going to go away. But if you are gluten-free and it significantly helps you feel better, then it's worth being gluten-free. But some contamination is not going to be a problem because you're not a celiac, if that makes sense.
All right, I'll hit you with a couple more questions. So someone's asked if you've got, say, some of those markers that you've just mentioned, let's say they're positive, but you don't actually have celiac disease. Have you found that people that have that kind of result are more likely to be gluten sensitive from your experience?
Yes. So the interesting thing is that celiac disease is an autoimmune condition. So is Hashimoto, so is rheumatoid arthritis, and so is type 1 diabetes. And it is known that people who have one autoimmune condition have a higher percentage chance of having more than one. And so even if you've got, let's say you've got RA, but you don't have celiac disease, the chance of you being a sensitive gluten person is higher because you have RA. So it is worthwhile considering the gluten part of your puzzle, your health puzzle, because a lot of this can be hand in hand. Doesn't mean it's going to be, because you've been diagnosed with one, you're definitely going to be diagnosed with a second autoimmune, but there is a connection. Even with fibromyalgia, they found that there is a higher percentage of non-celiac gluten sensitivity in groups of in that group of patients who have fibromyalgia. And there is actually quite a lot of undiagnosed celiacs in that group as well.
All right, I'm maybe just going to give you a heads up. I'm not going to ask all these other questions now, but maybe this will help you cover them. So people have asked, definitely how long, like if you're going to trial going gluten-free, how long does it take, or how long would you advise people until their symptoms might improve? Someone's asked, you know, how long until my actual gut stuff, you know, heals?
Yes.
How does it impact weight? Yeah, those are the main things, I think. And this one you can probably tackle. Can imbalances in gut health and healthy bacteria also contribute to being gluten sensitive?
Okay, so gluten, or not so much gluten, but let's go back to that idea of whole grains. Whole grains are really important for gut microbiome and for helping to put good gut flora in there. So again, taking gluten away for some people actually increases the risk of causing a poorer balance of gut microbiome in your GI tract. So it is important that if you go gluten-free, that you do think about the important foods that help you with your gut microbiome. So without going into it a lot, because most of you would have heard me speak before, and please go to the BJC library. There's so many great recordings on anti-inflammatory eating where I cover this quite a lot. In the absence of gluten, if you're going to go gluten-free, please make sure that you're trying to eat your 5 serves of vegetables a day, because all your vegetables will help you with good gut health and give you the nutrients that have actually been linked to anti-inflammation. Try and have your 1 to 2 pieces of fruit every day. Try and have a small handful of nuts at least a few times a week, but you can have it every day if you want. Try and eat, seeds, things like chia seeds that are gluten-free. They have fiber, so you're not going to miss out on the fiber if you've taken some of your gluten products away. They have magnesium, they have calcium, they have good fats, etc. Like LSA, your linseed, sunflower, almond meal, so that can also be covered in that nut and seed section. Or you can eat, natural nuts, small handful of natural nuts. So do your veg, do your fruit, do your nuts. If you're not a vegan or a vegetarian, try and eat some good fatty fish once or twice a week. And then when you do eat gluten-free products, we're going to try and make them whole grain. And I'll talk about that in a moment, of course. Try and include your lentils and legumes a couple of times a week because they are gluten-free and they're high protein and they have lots of fiber. So that's a good way of substituting some of those whole grains for something that's gluten-free without missing out on that superfoods element of what legumes and lentils can offer you. If you've got that base diet going, any chicken or meat is lean, no skin, no fat, etc. If you've got that base diet going, you're going to be meeting a lot of your nutritional needs. And as we know, something that is really important is that if we are eating an anti-inflammatory diet and we're trying to reduce our intake of added sugar, added fat, trans fat, saturated fat, moderating alcohol or keeping it at a minimum, reducing salt, a lot of the inflammation that you might be experiencing may already decrease. So even before I say to people, let's try gluten-free, we want to talk about, and what's your general diet like, and are there improvements we can make first? Because some people then don't even need to go gluten-free because they feel so much better. They needed to have a look at what they're generally doing in their food pattern, eating, preparation, what tips I can help provide that improve the intake of what they're doing, and they've reduced some of those other sugar and fat elements, and they already feel so much better. Unfortunately, what happens in research is some of the studies that happen, so there was a study that I read where people were gluten-free and vegan at the same time. Now, if you've never been vegan and you've never been gluten-free and you do them both at the same time and you feel amazing, is it because you were gluten-free, or was it because you went more plant-based and you significantly increased the plant food in your diet? So, of course, at the end where they say, oh, gluten-free appears to help with this anti-inflammation and people had less joint pain, then the limitation was, but did they because of just the gluten? Is it because they also then reduced sugar and fat, increased the plant foods, and took away the gluten? And that's not to say eat all the junk food you want and go gluten-free and see if it works for you, because that's also not going to work. The idea is your foundation intake working well for you? And then you remove the gluten and see if that makes you feel even better. This is a good systematic way to see what kind of food inclusions or exclusions are going to be helpful for you, rather than trying to do everything potentially all at once. Does that make sense? I hope.
Yeah. So would you suggest, well, I think that covers an important point, that if you're on the fence or if you're considering it, it's probably worth thinking of it really holistically and trying to get the veggies up, try and do some other really positive things, because that's going to give you a really good baseline before you then do anything that's a little more just harder. Because I think you're going to get into it now, like you've got me interested. I have never thought about going gluten-free, but I'd be interested to test it just out of interest. But maybe you can take us through now what might that look like for people who, if they are interested, what are some of the time frames, the pros and cons? Maybe go for that practical side now. So you've just finished watching part 1 of one of our recent educational events. Hope you enjoyed the content. If you'd like to access part 2, then you need to sign up for BJC Connect. It's a free platform where you can access not just the recordings of past events, but also access a whole range of upcoming future events and access our team of facilitators live. All of the details that you need to join BJC Connect are now flashing up on your screen. But otherwise, like our staff, subscribe if you'd like to see more information from BJC Health. Look forward to seeing you in an event soon.